I understand the desire to sort of point the finger at Nancy Pelosi and say, this is your fault or this is your shutdown. I think the ball's in her court. But remember, the president said that this is his shutdown, and I'm not clear on what amount of money he needs in order to sign a funding bill.
Outgoing Republican Congressman Ryan Costello on the blame game for the government shutdown. He said he thinks it'll drag on for at least several more weeks. I want to bring in now Adam Amara, former president for Young Democrats of America, and also Joe Watkins, former White House aide to President George H.W. Bush. And Republican strategist Rick Tyler, an MSNBC political analyst. To all of you, let's jump into this. Starting with you, Rick, how realistic is Congressman Costello's prediction? Are we looking at several more weeks of this?
Yeah, I think it could go on for weeks, maybe longer. It's just Donald Trump seems to have an intransigent position, and it's his position. The House and the Senate have both passed bills to fund the government, and what they haven't passed is one that's passed both houses and sent to the president. They could do that very easily, but Mitch McConnell has said he will not put a bill in front of the Senate that the president won't sign. But the president hasn't indicated what it is he will sign. And you noticed everybody left town, and you notice that the Republican leadership hasn't really informed its surrogates. No one is out there with a coherent message over the airways about what we're fighting for, and they seem to have just left this up to Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump's strategy is to wait till Nancy Pelosi is Speaker and then see if he can actually blame her. I think that's a misguided strategy, but I think that's his strategy.
Yeah, and that's the thing when it comes to number, when it comes to the names, steel slats, fence, barrier.
Force field. Yeah.
Exactly. Joe, what do you make of the fact that nobody seems to know what the president is willing to accept and what it'll take?
Well, that creates a problem, of course. It means that this thing could, as Rick said, drag on a lot longer than anybody would wish for it to drag on. And remember, again, there are like 13.5 million Americans who are impacted by this. I mean, not just the federal workers that we know about, but also the grantees, the full-time contractors, all those Americans who depend on these paychecks are right now in limbo because of this unfortunate shutdown. So it could drag on for weeks.
Yeah, and we've also heard from incoming White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, Atima. He's saying about, who's to blame for this. This is more of it. Let's listen.
This all comes down to Mrs. Pelosi's speakership. I think left to his own devices, that Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats probably would cut a deal, but they're protecting Mrs. Pelosi. She does not have the votes, and if she cuts a deal with the president of any sort before her election on January 3rd, she's at risk of losing her speakership.
All right, Atima, what's the truth level when it comes to that and what he said?
Well, that was a very cute and lovely spin, but I think if anybody watched how soon-to-be Speaker Pelosi worked to secure her votes within the caucus to become Speaker, I think that you would understand that what he just said is a lot of BS, actually. It's a very cute way, quite honestly, to spin the fact that, Trump is trying to make the shutdown the Democrats' fault, kind of the way for my fellow millennials and younger Gen Xers out there who watch Mean Girls, Gretchen Wiener's trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen, right? This is very much something that he claimed very proudly in the White House that he was going to do live on national television. He was going to shut down the government over funding for a wall. And so he's going to try and gin up his base and try and make the point now when the numbers come back. And the numbers right now are not in his favor. They're clearly saying it's his fault. So, we'll see how much longer he's willing to withstand the pain of lowering poll numbers. I think especially when it tips into his base, that's when it's going to happen.
Rick, I have to ask you, any truth to that when you see and hear Mulvaney talking about that and, how this is all seeming to protect Pelosi and driving a wedge between the Democrats, especially when it comes to that vote?
He may get people to believe that because it's sort of inside baseball. But if you watch the speaker's race very carefully, Speaker Pelosi went about getting her votes one at a time. She has the votes; they're secured. But not only that, there isn't a challenger to Pelosi. There wasn't even a named challenger during the lead up to it. So she has the votes. She's secure. In her position, she will be the speaker. She'll be a formidable speaker. But the president wants, he always wants a foil. He always wants someone against, and he's going to get that. But he's got a pretty tough foil here.
So much of a blame game going on with this. Joe, you got the new Reuters Ipsos poll that found that 47% of Americans here blame President Trump for the shutdown. That's compared to 33% who blamed Democrats. So what's the significance in that? And do you see any link between these numbers and the Trump administration's effort to pin the blame on Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I think Rick is right. They're going to continue to try to pin the blame on Nancy Pelosi, but clearly the president said that it was his shutdown early on, and I think he was right. It's his shutdown, and 47% of the public sees it that way, and maybe some who aren't willing to say so. But clearly, he shoulders a great deal of the blame for where we are right now.
Well, I want to bring up another poll here because this one is involving impeachment. It's from Harvard. Caps Harris here. So here are the numbers. Voters were asked if President Trump should be impeached and removed from office, censured by Congress, or no action should be taken. So you got 41% said no action should be taken. 39% opted for impeachment and removal from office. And 20% said he should be censured. So how should the White House interpret that, Rick?
Well, look, I'm actually troubled by this poll because I think impeachment is a very serious remedy for a president who misbehaves or has become unaccountable. And we don't have a list or an articles of impeachment drawn up by the House, and until we do, and that may come after the Mueller investigation report is released. I doubt it will come before that. But until we do, I'd really trouble talking about it because we don't want to go down this road because impeachment and talk of impeachment really undermines elections. It's undoing an election, and the founders knew that very, very well. And I think even though I'm a big Trump critic, I'd really have to be convinced of the evidence that he needs to be impeached. And so I worry about that. I think the way to handle this is politically and at the polls, soundly defeat him at the polls if you want to get rid of him.
And Tima, what do you think of that when it comes to this? And you're nodding. So is there agreement in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things about the poll, I was agreeing with Rick on that, is just that, yeah, this is, pretty stunning to see not only a certain amount of Americans who think that he should be impeached, but also censured. So that's a large number for just any president of either party. There's a majority of Americans, at least certainly in this poll, who think that there is cause to reprimand the president, be it an impeachment or censorship. That's one thing to say. But the other thing I was going to say certainly is that I think to Rick's point about impeachment, it's a serious thing, of course, and so obviously it's well known in the Democratic base that most folks think that Trump is a crook and likely, definitely, potentially a traitor to his country, right? And so the House Dem leadership, well aware of it, they picked up 40 seats with a lot of folks who are interested in these investigations, which they're staffing up their committees to take on. But the onus is going to be on them, really, to investigate and make a clear case for impeachment as a result of those investigations that even the Republicans would have trouble staying with the president on.
Joe, final word when it comes to that and this impeachment talk and whether that impeachment ball will start rolling once the Dems take over.
I think both the team and Rick have it right that Congress will be very thoughtful in terms of how they approach this. They'll do their investigations. The new Congress will. But I think everybody will be waiting to see what the Mueller report has to say. And then maybe there might be this kind of talk continuing. But it's still too early.
All right. Natima, Joe, and Rick, Happy New Year, all of you. Thank you so much for being with me.
You too.